Looks like we are ready to get started. I said this a little bit earlier, but for those of you who hadn't joined with us yet, my name is Michaela, and I am our moderator for this session, as well as Diamond, who's also in the chat, and you can find us throughout if you're having any questions or technical difficulties. I want to remind everyone that if you're seeking CEUs, it'll be really important for you to fill out a brief survey that will be shared with you at the end of the session, along with the medallion code for the scavenger hunt. So you are now logged into the TCOM Trainer Roundtable, and I would love to introduce our presenters, Robin and Alicia.
Thank you, Michaela. Okay, I guess I'll go ahead and share my screen.
Hello, everyone. I think I should say welcome back to a lot of you. I'm seeing lots of familiar names and familiar faces from this morning. So, you know what? I'm going to ask everyone before we get started, just so that Alacia and I have an idea of who is here. If you could use the reactions, if you were here in our session in the morning, can you do either a thumbs up or a yes reaction, just so we know how much that we need to do for review? So, so we're just going to go with it.
They disappear. So I think in that time period, like some of them might have disappeared after the few seconds because I didn't have the whole participants open, but several people put in the chat that they were here earlier.
Okay, great, great. So, well, welcome everyone, and welcome to those of you that are just joining us for the first time. My name is Robin Orlando Price, and this is my colleague, Alicia Eicher. So I want to encourage all of you, if you weren't with us earlier, and this is the first time you're joining us this afternoon, welcome. Please, if you could, please scan the QR code, that's on the slide here. And I believe Alacia is also going to put it in chat. We're only asking that you do that because we'd like you to sign in separately from TCOM, because after the training, we are going to be sending different materials and resources to all of our participants from the morning session and the afternoon session. Those will be going out by the end of October. And so we want to make sure that everyone can get those resources. So if you can follow that link, it's just going to ask you for your email, your name, and I think your role, if I'm correct on that. So, and this is the winner's circle, and we are going to be together for the next 2 hours. And we're going to be flexible, but I'll be getting into that in a second. And this is going to be, for the first few slides anyhow, it's going to be a little review for our friends that were with us this morning. Okay, Alacia. And I'm going to do a really abbreviated version of who we are. Again, my name is Robin, and I have been with the Parade Foundation one way or another for the last 19 years. And I know you're thinking, my God, she must have been 5 when she started. So I appreciate that. But I truly feel honored that I've been able to work with John Lyons for that long. More than anything, I so believe in the TCOM assessments. And as I had shared earlier in the morning, I really, really believe in the power of supporting our workforce, who does the heavy lift of working with our families, our children, with our adult clients. And as a trainer, as a teacher, as a coach, if I can support our workforce in better supporting our families and the people we serve, then I think that is one of the best things that I can do. And I believe in communiometrics and really having powerful conversations that can change the way we plan and think and serve families and children. Alacia?
Hi, everyone. I think that most of you were here this morning. I really do. So this is
okay.
But I'm Alicia Eicher. I work in Pittsburgh, PA with Robin. I am a senior applied learning and development specialist. And my primary role is leading our common assessment team in Allegheny County. training, coaching, support, and then any project management or new implementation of new initiatives around the assessment is really what I do. And again, I'm super passionate about adult learning. It's like understanding adult learning has really changed my perspective on life, honestly, because we're all just in this journey, learning and growing and developing. So I love training. I love working with people. I love inspiring people. So thank you for having us, for coming to our session this afternoon.
Yeah, thanks for so many of you coming back to our session. This is wonderful. Okay, so I think because so many of you have been with us, you've already seen our disclosure, so we can skip over that. And I will just talk about this pledge really quickly for the few people that maybe weren't with us in the morning. And that is to say that we had a morning session and an afternoon session that you were all in. And so they've kind of been mashed together. So this is somewhat of a mashup. And although this afternoon session was, it's a roundtable, it's more of a discussion. I think Alacia and I are going to continue on with a lot of the booster session of Train the Trainer. And we're going to go over some of those resources and continue some of the discussion on the techniques, if that sounds good with everybody. Because I think there was a lot of, starting to share earlier in our morning session, but we are going to have a couple of opportunities. We're going to ask a couple of just sort of big picture questions about where ongoing learning support is needed as trainers. Also, what possibly you would need if we wanted to develop more of a coaching model through TCOM. And then also, what do you see as ongoing resources for training for your staff? So we're going to intermix with some of those questions, but we're also going to continue sharing on the specific training resources and strategies. So we're calling it a twofer. You've all been super flexible. We want to continue being flexible. Want to remind everyone, steal shamelessly and share relentlessly. I think there was a lot of that this morning. I have a list of things I want to utilize. And again, just encourage everyone to be open to all the learning possibilities today and for the next 3 days of this conference. So welcome aboard. If you weren't with us in the morning, if you also wouldn't mind just in chat to introduce yourself, just who you are, and also what you hope to get out of the next 2 hours, if you wouldn't mind doing that, just so that you can put it out there. We're not going to necessarily go over it, but I think it's nice since so many of us were together in the morning. Would like to welcome the rest of you to our learning community today. Okay. All right, Alacia. So we're going to start off with one of these questions, and I want to think about this a little bit. So we are going to think about, as a trainer, and this is different than what we talked about earlier in our morning session, but as a TCOM trainer, what are the type of, whether it's training, whether it's resources, whether it's skills, what are the kinds of supports that you think you either need or that you have that are super vital that maybe others don't, that are important for a true, solid trainer that trains TCOM? So as a TCOM trainer, I want you to think about what are those specific skills, resources, additional trainings maybe. What's in your toolbox that either you don't have that you think you need, or that you have and you think it's really critical that others should have, that would be really useful as a TCOM trainer as we think about that ongoing learning. So Alacia, did you keep the annotation, the next slide?
Yep, it's here. I just wasn't sure when you were ready to.
Okay. I know it was funky before that we had some writing over each other. And I don't know, do we want to keep it with annotation or do we want to go into breakouts? What do you think, Alacia?
I think either annotation or chat.
Okay. Oh yeah, chat. Let's do that. So we can either use chat or annotation, and take a couple minutes. I really want you to sit back for a minute and think about and even if you yourself don't possess a particular skill, but maybe you've seen someone that really knows they do something with the TCOM training or an aspect of the TCOM training that is really critical, or maybe there is a skill that is really critical, or something you think you need to be a strong TCOM trainer. Let's put it in either chat or use the annotation, because the reason why we're asking about this is because there is such a strong component on getting trainers trained, right? You go through the TCOM Train the Trainer, you've got all these resources that are in place, but now it's thinking about how do we continue the growth of that learning? How do we continue to build those skills? What are those skills that might be needed? So what are those really good things that we might need? And we'll just see here for a minute or two.
Mhm.
And while you're thinking and typing, I'm going to think. And then maybe we can do a little bit of sharing for a few minutes. Oh, well, I'm loving that about connecting concepts in multiple trainings. Oh, that's good.
A few people have mentioned coaching.
Yep, see that. Okay, how about if we take one more minute? So if you haven't put something in there, if you could take a minute and put it in there. And then let's talk a little bit about this. Okay, would anyone like to share on maybe one of the comments that they've made, or if they didn't make a comment or didn't write a comment, but would like to share their comments? I'm really curious about some of these areas that were written down. Who will be brave and bold? So the person who wrote about being able to connect concepts in multiple trainings, I don't want to put you on the spot if you don't feel comfortable speaking out loud. I'm just going to question, I wonder if you've seen this in action, that you've done it, or that's the kind of training that you would like to see, like seeing how that's done, because I'm really fascinated with that.
So my role at work right now is I'm a clinical trainer. So one of the things that I do is train on ANSA-CANS and TCOM, but I also train quality documentation and our medical record and person-centered planning and various other things. And I'd done a lot of those trainings previously to my leading the training department. I had done a lot of those, and I see the difference because before I was doing some trainings here and there on top of my job, and I had the content and I would do those trainings. But once I moved to training and it really became more my focus, I really did find that over time, I stopped looking at them as standalone trainings, and I started seeing and being able to help staff better understand all of those connections, because I'm doing all of those and often with the same individuals over time. So I don't feel like I really ever do any one of those trainings anymore without connecting back and referring to different concepts. So, when I'm in the medical record training, I'm talking to them about Okay, let's remember about this with ANSA cans, or we're doing care plan. And I'm like, okay, let's look over here. And how do you pull that in? So I really feel it makes a huge difference having one trainer that's able to go through all of that and see all those connections and do that in every training.
Kathleen, have you noticed how your learners respond, how your staff respond? Do you see more of light bulbs going off, or have you noticed anything like that?
For some, I think definitely. And just, trainings can be very overwhelming for staff, right?
Sure.
There's a lot of information. So I think it helps with that retention. And I think I see that more, like not in the moment so much, but when I come back to something in another training, I think is when I recognize those light bulbs more with them going, oh, wait a minute. Okay, that's how that connects. Or I think it just helps with retention as well, because they're hearing a reference to it again, that it makes more sense to them now. And I train a lot of new hires. So again, a lot of what I see is that they don't have the context yet for everything that I'm telling them. So I think it really helps them with the context as well. Even if they haven't had a chance to get out there and shadow yet, they start getting more context.
Absolutely. It'd be great if you could bring them back, a few months after, and then like bring it in again together.
Yeah, a couple of the trainers have asked for that. Time is a premium, so it's hard to get that, but it would be nice to do that. I know we've spaced our trainings out differently, kind of in that framework to try to do that, but we can't get too far out because then their lives are too busy then.
Yeah. Thank you for sharing. Alacia, I'm sorry, you were going to say something?
Yeah, I think that we have, the separation of assessment versus other components of practice has been an issue that I've seen live in action. And what ends up happening is then your assessment becomes just something else you have to do. It's not really purposeful. It's just something else you have to do. So I think we have worked pretty hard in Allegheny County to develop trainings that supplement the assessment. So it might be different from how you're describing this, but I completely understand how I see light bulbs go off in people. Oh, that's how you use the assessment. It's supposed to be used for my plan. Oh, that's what the conversation looks like. And this is how trauma plays into this. And this is how equity is a part of this conversation. So rather than separate pieces, it definitely, there needs to be that connection. It's hard to do when you work in systems where different people are training different things. And that's one of the issues we have. I don't know if other people experience that. So that collaboration at the system level is important. But I guess I just wanted to kind of relate to you and kind of explain how what we've done is just being intentional about mentioning how the assessments play into all of the other pieces of, the service components. And I think it's helpful. I think people are like, okay, that's how this fits into my life.
I'm curious because a couple folks have mentioned coaching. So is anyone willing to share maybe how they have implemented any kind of coaching aspect to their training work in their jurisdictions? Or if that's something that they're looking to do? Kim, I see your head nodding. So I don't know if you were saying you would like to incorporate or that you're doing that in California.
No, well, not in my county, maybe other counties, but I would love to. We do the trainings and then the research and things like that. And we have a meaningful use of cans that we're revamping to be Kansa soon, but we don't really do too much coaching. We're available at our specific clinics if people reach out, but I would love to do a different kind of coaching model where maybe we sit in and support, or we, really just that hands-on part of coaching and support that I've done in other things like in wraparound. So I would really like to be able to do something like that. But we're not quite set up that way as of yet.
Okay. I like that you likened it to wraparound because I know exactly when you say that what you're thinking. Absolutely. I'm wondering if I could put Barry on the spot, since you said that that's a lot of the work. And am I pronouncing your name correctly? Is it
Barry?
Okay. Would you mind, Barry, sharing with the group a little bit of what you do?
No, not at all. That's fine.
Thank you.
I work with the CANS New York Technical Assistance Institute, and we are funded and partnered with New York State Department of Health.
Okay.
There are 4 of us who are part of this collaborative partnership, and we're spread out throughout the state. So there's an agency we each work for that is a partner representing the different regions of New York State. And so I work for an agency called Hillside. I'm located in Rochester, New York. And so I actually cover 39 counties of Western New York in terms of those care management agencies. I could be their go-to person. However, our team has become so collaborative that we've developed relationships with supervisors and agencies really that cross over each other's regions. So in addition to the trainings that we offer on a regular monthly basis now virtually, coaching is it's like the number one priority of our deliverable of what we were created for.
Okay.
And so it's evolved. We've been an entity for 4 years, a little more than 4 years. And it has evolved, and we are definitely feeling that we're at a place where folks recognize us. They know our institute exists. And I tell people who may call or email me, I'm so sorry to bother you, ... The first thing I say is, I am so lucky and privileged that this work with the CANs is my full-time job. And so you are not wasting my time. If you reach out, this is what I'm here for, but I beg you not waste your own time by not doing that. So like we do coaching, just phone calls, just in time, in the moment. And we've really been spreading out our group coaching opportunities where when we have a supervisor or director reach out and say, oh my gosh, we just did an audit and people are not rating the CANs right, or we're seeing so many people not get this masking, or the acuity is so low, then now we've kind of turned it into, instead of me just helping that supervisor, hey, can we set up a couple sessions over Zoom, or I could maybe pop into your team meeting and we could do a couple group rating exercises, or maybe someone can bring a case. And so we're using those organic opportunities then to reinforce a lot of the skills that people had at the like general required introductory training. So we're really trying to, I love the spaced education and all the follow-up steps that you described. And I would really love to be able to get some buy-in from our team to make those pieces required, because we really are at the stage where we've developed our team and our presence, that we really want to focus on making sure we're not just teaching, but there's a transfer of learning, because that's really what it's all about, is changing the outcomes for kids and families. So
thank you so much for sharing. Like, that is super exciting. And when I think about spaced education and coaching and how they go hand in hand, I think what you just shared, for folks that don't have that kind of coaching resource, I know a lot of us don't, or not to that level. I think that probably is setting off a lot of ideas for people. So you may be getting some emails, people asking questions, and I want to encourage people in our workshop today to definitely reach out. I hope that's okay, Barry, but it's all about sharing this information.
That's why we're all here, right?
Yeah. Oh, how exciting. That's great. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, that's terrific. Anyone else want to comment? Because I do want to, shift and go, like I said, we're doing a balancing act here. I want to balance what we're going to cover today. But is there anything else that maybe someone wants to bring up that I didn't acknowledge, either in chat or what we have here? I think it's important about the connection to planning. I appreciate that comment. I think that's similar to, what we were talking about with how the pieces all fit together. Like, I think if we were looking at training just the assessment as a standalone, I think we've certainly learned that lesson, that that you can't. It really will fall short, because you have people then thinking, well, why am I doing this? What's the purpose of this? So it's always the connecting of those dots and making it meaningful. So, oh, I'm using this to help me communicate with my family and the team that's around that family, or it's helping me to communicate with my system partners. Oh, this is helping me so that we can plan together in partnership with this family on how we are going to meet certain goals or help create certain goals. So again, I appreciate this idea of how planning, connecting the assessment to planning, or connecting it to these other trainings. I think those are all really great ideas. I'm going to ask, but is there anything else that someone wants to mention before we kind of pivot back into doing some of the highlights of training? Because the chat's going to be open. I want you to be putting questions or ideas down. But before we move back, is there anything else that you all think is really important that you want to make sure we're thinking about, that makes like really critical to that ongoing learning or to that training piece? I know I've got some amazing thinkers out there, so I'm waiting.
I want to mention something really quickly, and this goes back to Kathleen's comment about the connection, but I almost think of it as like an access, and we can probably all relate to this as trainers who are working with different levels of providers. So managers, directors, supervisors, direct service staff, clinicians, families, youth. There are all these different levels. So you have like that access. Then you have all the different topic areas. So where do we need to, put those points as far as how we might support a supervisor might look a little different than how we support a direct staff, because they play a huge role in managing and maintaining those conversations about the connection, making sure the assessment informs the plan, but what about a director? Where's their role? So I just feel like, I don't know, it's almost like plotting out all these different points, and they're going to look different based on who we're talking to and what we're talking about.
Excellent point, Alacia. Yep. Okay, well, we'll let that resonate. And like I said, please use the chat if things come up. But I think we're going to shift back into some of the training highlights. Does that sound good?
All right, so I guess this is me now.
It's you.
So again, most of you were in our session this morning, and we went through a lot of adult learning theory. We went through the importance of messaging, some different virtual tips, spaced education, micro learning. We talked about a lot of that. So at this point, what we're doing is we're diving more into that 3-hour, what we do here, our main virtual live training session, and some of the things we cover in that. And if you weren't there in the morning, everyone who is attending is going to get our full entire PowerPoint and resources, which will include examples of the pre-work, examples of, the various resources. So this is after pre-work, we're live in training on Zoom, because that's what we're doing. We're still doing virtual trainings here. And when we kick off the day, of course, other than setting the tone, our group agreements and icebreaker, one of the first things that we do is dive into the why do we assess. And you probably heard this so many times already today, but our messaging of engagement, communication, and planning is really kind of that key piece for connecting the assessment to practical application. And just like we just talked about, this is also how you connect the assessment to your plan, to the collaboration you're having across a super complex team of other professionals and family members, and how you're building that relationship. So I feel like we have to go through the ratings, we have to do the practice, we have to do the vignettes, but like the heart and soul of it is really about using the assessments to their potential. So this messaging and training, I just reiterate again, super critical. And you guys might have different, different like attention grabbers or ways to describe the purpose of assessment. This is just an example of what we do. So they see this in their pre-work, and then it's one of the first things they see when they come into training again. And like I mentioned this morning, I'm very frank about, you need to remember this. this is what's going to make this assessment useful for you in your life, in your work. It's going to connect it to your purpose in helping people. So does anyone have anything different that they do? Does anyone have any other like key messages or attention grabbers or ways that they connect the assessment to practical application and promote buy-in in their trainings? And feel free to speak out or use the chat. Just want to welcome discussion. Thoughts? Okay, well, if you guys do, I want to share what you do or any of your ideas about like that introduction piece, that messaging, feel free to do so. And also, if you have thoughts, like just what, Robin just did that activity with you all as far as what your needs are as trainers. If you have thoughts as we move along, like, wait, I need more support around this area. Or, I want more resources around this piece of the training process. Speak out, because we're taking notes on this. Parade wants to know what your needs are as trainers, and we want to be able to provide effective ongoing support as a group of trainers. I think there's like 600 trainers trained nationally, and we have 32 in the room today. So your feedback's so important. All right, I'm going to keep moving along, but please share more updates on scoring the items. Okay. Yes, thank you, Dan.
I think that's a great comment. Like, I think that's something that should go on the top of the list, Dan. I'm so glad you mentioned that, because that's one of those critical pieces, right? And I think we sometimes not skip over it, but we don't think about it enough. That's really important.
Are you referring to the changes in scoring items, like new tips on scoring items, Robin?
Yeah.
Yeah, it is true. I mean, I feel like there's an evolution in the way that some items are, the caveats, the pro tips, the different things that we want to make sure we're explaining correctly. And it's changed over time. And as trainers, we need to be kept updated on it, or little minute shift in meanings or things becoming broader, more narrow.
Oh, I love the idea that's come out here, a newsletter. I love that.
I love that. And I love the comment about, in actuality, the CANS is not an assessment. It is the product of all of the assessments previously done for the youth and family. It communicates the story. I love that.
Yeah.
One thing that we've said in trainings too is similar is that, the CANS is not this piece of paper or this page on a IT system. It's a conversation. It's you organically getting to know someone and understanding their story, and what you're putting in the system is, and it's just how you're organizing that information. And I appreciate the feedback from Dan again. Had people assume I knew about changes? Me too.
So it sounds like, just to wrap up, not wrap up, but summarize some of this, like if there was some type of regular newsletter that maybe it had standing topics almost, where it's any updates to scoring changes, any updates to like the core items or versions, maybe that's communicated out, because everyone would receive then this newsletter, and it would be out so many times a year at a specific time. So we know that that's coming. And then I saw also the comment about you're trained, and then there's, you have access to the blogs and different things like that. But sometimes it's like, how do you then be able to interact with other people? And I think that's, again, that newsletter. I often wonder, I'm sorry, Alacia, I don't mean to take us off, but I also wonder, like, I really am big into this, so forgive this, but like the idea of almost like a buddy or mentor system. So like, do you have a jurisdiction that links up with another jurisdiction in terms of trainer support, in the sense of Robin's gonna link up with Kim. I'm picking on you, Kim, from California, and they're going to, for, a 6-month period, they're going to connect 2 or 3 times just to check in on how training's going or something like that, or just sharing of resources, but in a more formal way, rather than just at a conference, you check in with someone, you kind of have like that summer camp, like, oh, we connected and we're going to follow up with each other, but almost like a way to, sort of match up with each other, but in a more formal, like kind of buddy system. I don't know. Clearly it's the afternoon and I'm not thinking good words here, but like the concept of that, you know what I mean? Like just that, I don't know.
No, I think, Robin, that we can, and for everyone here today, like that's what this roundtable discussion is about, is brainstorming new ways that we can support the trainer group. We're giving you information about what we do in training, but we also want to figure out what is the best way to support this collaborative group of trainers. And I'm hearing over and over the newsletter. I don't really have time to read blogs, like just some of this theme that like we need a single point of information, of updates, consistent updates. So newsletter or something like that, a trainer's.
And that's manageable because we don't have day-to-day time to be checking all of that stuff, right?
Yeah. And also like, through the blog, there's all sorts of stuff that isn't necessarily related to training all the time, right? There's so many different things coming through.
Yeah. There. Good point. Oh, these are great ideas, folks. Really good.
Yeah. So a trainer specific point of information, whether that's a newsletter or something where things are accessible to everyone and consistent.
Heather has a great idea about a social media page or an app just for trainers. Holy smokes, I love that idea. Oh my gosh, I love that. That's a good one.
An app. Yeah, that's pretty awesome. Yep.
Keep the ideas coming, guys. This is great. This is so great.
And we will, as we have these ideas coming in, we're also going to slowly move through what we have for our actual presentation. But I'm really not as worried about the presentation piece as I am as far as this dialogue and having this as a collaborative group. So yeah, let's keep the energy going and let's see what we have next here. Oh, so this is just something that we have started to do. This is also from the pre-work. This very short mini vignette is what participants read in the pre-work, and we challenge them in the pre-work. What needs do you see here? What strengths do you see here? Now, mind you, a new hire doesn't even know the items on the assessment. They don't know anything about the rating scale. This is simply an activity to read something and say, you know what? There's something going on with parenting, something up with her job, and there's some substance use stuff. So just starting to practice pulling that out. And what are the strengths? So when we do this activity at the very beginning of the training, we refer back because not everybody does the pre-work, and we've talked about that earlier. We only have a portion of the people that do it, but we're bringing this back up and reinforcing the idea of just starting to think about what are the strengths, what are the needs. So we actually pull their answers from the pre-work right into the presentation. We let them talk about it and we kind of reinforce, this is what you all said in the pre-work. These are the, different areas that we would want to address or work on with this parent, this family, and these are some strengths that we see. And they're not correlated directly to the items. Open to support isn't really an item, but it will fit into the Kanza in some way, right? And when we get into talking about rating skills, you'll see how one thing that we did is we really started with this basic foundational right here. Then we start to do a little more of a building block for expertise all the way up to being able to answer complex items with, really specific hard ratings. But this is like stage 1 of that. We kind of turned it into like a gradual process.
Because you're just really getting people to get in that mindset, right, Alacia? It's just starting for them to think about things in terms of what are strengths and what are needs, what are challenges.
Mm-hmm. Does anyone do anything similar like that, or have any ideas before I jump into 6 key principles? This is kind of new. We've probably been doing it only for maybe like 6 months or so. So it's kind of new, but I think that it does give a sense of foundation for people. So they're not just coming in like, I have no clue what we're doing. They have they already started to exercise that part of their brain a little bit.
Hey, can I ask a question about that?
Of course.
And if you mentioned this already, I apologize. So how early in their hiring process are you guys training new users on assessment?
So the way that we offer a monthly training, and that monthly training, so one group of people per month would receive the pre-work a week before, their 3.5-hour live session, and then the post-work, which goes up to 30 days after. So with somebody being hired, it's really as soon as their supervisor registers them for the next upcoming training. So most of the time, within 30 days, they're being trained, probably more so even sooner than that.
Okay. And the reason why I'm asking is I like the warm-up activities and the pre-work, but in Tennessee, they get their assessment training on day 3.
Wow.
So we really don't have that opportunity to give the pre-work, but I really like the idea of it. It's just hard to get them that information on their 3rd day of employment. So,
Jennifer,
Absolutely.
is this for child welfare? Is it for mental health? What system are you referencing?
DCS. So I work with Vanderbilt Center of Excellence, and we do the training for DCS for the child welfare workers. So they get cans and fast training their first week on the job.
Okay. Because for our child welfare, we do their training. I think it's maybe their 2nd or 3rd week. I can't remember, but it's certainly not the 3rd week. Oh boy. I wish you could do something like as a follow-up. I'm always about the follow-up, but I recognize you have to go with the schedule that you're given. That does make it tough because they're day 3. That's
right. And I know there's a couple of other folks from COE in this training session. And personally, I'm not a huge fan of it because I feel like they need a little bit more time within the department. Because it's literally day 3. They start on Monday, get their equipment, whatever happens on Tuesday, then Wednesday they get us. They had moved it to Friday, then back to Wednesday. But to me, I've been around a long time, but if I was a new hire, to me, having this right at the beginning, I would be super overwhelmed. But most of them cope and do really well, and we follow up with them. We process through their first assessments with them because we consult with them on all the assessments anyway. So we train and consult. So we follow them throughout the process, the assessment practice. But to me, I would just be, if I was an FSW, a family service worker, I would be overwhelmed on day 3 having this at me. So
yeah, I think I would too. That's great though that you provide all that follow-up though support. So it's all, I don't want to say it makes up for what they go through on that day 3, but that's great that you can do the processing and do, some of the, pulling it apart and having them really be able to work and talk with you. That's fantastic.
Yeah. And I think that, that's a tough challenge, and that's hard on the workers for sure. And if you can't do the pre-work, maybe it's, if you have the time in the training in the earlier parts of the day to really try to infuse some of the basic, like this warm-up activity or some of the stuff that's in the pre-work about, why do we assess? Because that's another challenge. If you're trying to fit everything into one single day, it's a lot. Even if it isn't day 3, it's a lot. So, I'm sure we would be happy to brainstorm with you and see, how you could potentially work some of the pre-work stuff into training. There's a lot of stuff in chat.
And some of that stuff is integrated in the training. It's an all-day training. So it's just, a lot of it is integrated. It's just, we just can't do it in the pre-work because of the time frame. But I will say when we do recertifications every year, it is a half-a-day training where we don't have as much because those are people who are recertifying. So they know a lot of the pre-work stuff already.
There's some awesome stuff in the chat too, as far as the skills of training on the conversation. Another sharing of Dan Warner's video which is amazing. It's literally, you could see someone engaging through the conversation. So yes.
I'm so glad people like that. That's funny. I didn't really know it was so much work to get it all together, you know? So I'm glad you guys like it. I wondered if it was overdoing it. My boss is always telling me shorter videos. I was like, I'm doing a 30-minute one.
No, Dan, I think that it's very much so needed across, the whole collaborative. People need to see what it looks like. And that's one of the hardest things to train, because we're like, rate it this way, rate it that way. But like, what does that look like in real life? That's adult learning again. But I think that with that video and pairing it with some like actual role plays or partnering up, like actually putting that into practice would be an amazing way to really help people feel comfortable. Because it is scary. There's like the Kansas, but they can feel really intimidating for someone that's new to the field. So any of that practice, and so yeah, the chat's awesome. Thank you all for sharing and.
Oh, I see a shout out here too to Suzanne Buttons and Joshua Nellis for conducting the cans. Oh my goodness, someone is knocking at my door. That's terrible. This is great stuff, guys. Please, this is really good. Keep sharing these.
And that cheat sheet. Rachel has a cheat sheet. So I love this. All right. We'll keep moving along here. I think, okay, 6 key principles. And this was just another area that we wanted to engage with you all, because this is a challenging piece of training, but it is so foundational and critical. The issue that we found with 6 key principles is that when you explain these to someone who doesn't have context about the assessment, they don't understand the structure of the assessment, they don't understand, much about it, and you're just jumping in and talking about these principles, it's almost too abstract for this to solidify in their minds. We have went through so many different approaches to trying to like tie this into real life experiences for staff. And we wanted to engage in another discussion with you. That's what this is all about this afternoon, about what you do with 6 key principles. And we could share a little bit about where we're at with what we're doing. But let's just, instead of even doing breakout rooms for time's sake, can we just engage in a discussion? What are you guys doing to train 6 key principles? Like we know we talk about them and explain them, right? But what kind of creative activities do you use? I see, Christy, you have your hand up.
Yeah, I can't say that we use any kind of like activities about it, but what I do address the fact that, listen, this is really abstract right now. Like I'm trying to throw out some principle, some categories here that you don't have an anchor to, because you haven't like seen the, the tool, you haven't like been through it. But I want to put this out there right now, because as we go through the training, I'm going to take this, principle and anchor it to a certain conversation. And I'm going to take this principle and anchor it to a certain conversation. And I'm going to refer back to this and say, remember when I said you weren't going to really understand when we said the, it's services, not, or don't, it's the person, not the services. Kind of, I'll be referring back to it. So I acknowledge the fact that these are principles that are floating around in the air for them right now. And then I'm going to grab them and anchor them at some point.
I love that, Christy. I think that's like my style of training too. I'm just upfront with people. Like, this is probably confusing to you right now. And, giving them that, like, that information relating to them, like, yeah, this is a lot to take in. So let's go step by step. But I love that. And even one thing I started to do too is, before I start explaining 6 key principles, before I go through them, which we used to spend like 40 minutes talking about them, now we're down to like 5 to 10 because people don't get it yet. But I will pull up the, we have a score sheet, a paper version of a score sheet that kind of replicates what it looks like in the system. And I'll give them the context of, see the items, see the ratings. Each item is assigned a rating. They are separated into domains, like very basic overview of what that score sheet looks like. But it at least gives them some context about how they fit into the assessment. Like if we're telling you all about this assessment and you didn't see it yet, so that's something I do. Anyone else have any tips or ways that they reinforce the 6 key principles, or ways that they support this, tie it in? Things that they've tried that didn't work? Stories from the field to exemplify the items. Yep, that's where we're at and what we're doing now. We've done things like a taboo game where we have people, they pick 3 of the 6 key principles and have to explain it without using the words and the principles, like explain it through examples. And it was kind of fun and engaging, but a lot of times people got really confused with that because they didn't have the skill set to do that. We also made comics at some point and had pulled up these comics and had people identify what the comic represented, but they weren't real life situations. They were very silly. I can't even remember what they were. Didn't really work well either because it really wasn't reinforcing that real life, what they really look like in assessment, right? Okay. Break each one down with examples, refer back as we go through the training. So I think there's a lot of consistency scenarios. Anyone else want to share?
Alacia, I was just going to say too, when, we space things out or have, micro learnings, you can also have an additional micro learning just to revisit the 6 key principles after the fact. After doing this for 6 months, then it becomes a lot more meaningful. And I think people don't need to be afraid of mixing up when you might revisit some of these topics, because then it's like, oh my gosh, now I get it. And it really becomes meaningful and you even become more aware of it. And it, I think, strengthens your understanding and your use of it. So I think that's why, even with the situation that Jennifer mentioned, I know the pre-work, obviously you're doing it because you want people just to get in the mindset before they even enter the training about, thinking about strengths and needs. You can always revisit that a couple months into it and just see, are people getting those basic concepts? Because if they're still struggling with that, then they're struggling with how they're being able to score a can. So I think we should be creative in revisiting some of these topics that you think only can be done at certification or at the very beginning of our learning, and, coming back to them, circling back and reinforcing it.
Absolutely.
That's all.
Yeah, no, I mean, I completely agree. I think that we want to expand on space education and be able to do some kind of a check-in.
But learning's not linear, right? So there's the idea that we're building, but it's also about being able to circle back or to revisit different areas. There's going to be lots of different ways to do that.
Absolutely.
So here's something that actually just popped in my head. So it's still percolating, okay, mind you all. But going back to your warm-up activity, and I'm not sure how folks are set up, but I would have access at my agency to be able to attend group supervisions with, the clinical supervisors. And so maybe sending out a warm-up activity for a group supervision group, right? Like a month ahead, and then make the appointment to make sure you're going to be there. I don't know, a month might be too long, but a couple of weeks ahead, and then have the discussion and have that little micro learning opportunity. So because I usually train folks within their first couple of weeks of starting with us, which I find someone, I can't remember who else said, I think Jennifer, just people are overwhelmed and it's just one more thing they're having to learn, especially right now that we're doing so much of it online, right? And so I'm having to revisit with folks, and that's why the Zoom Hangouts become really useful and important, especially for the new staff. And my favorite conversations usually happen when I have veteran staff who've been with us a little bit, and then newer staff. because then they're really learning from one another, right? But I love this idea of the micro learnings I'm thinking of attaching it to group supervision and working with our clinical supervisors and saying, hey, maybe we could do these little things maybe once a month. I can come visit because we do group supervision once a week. So just it's percolating in my head right now. And I thought I would share.
I think that's so excellent, Hilda, honest to God, because again, people don't want to have another meeting, or it's hard to schedule it, right? So people always appreciate when you can take advantage of an existing meeting. And if we're talking about a 5-10 minute max, where it's a concise, very, you've got it drilled down to the topic and you make it engaging, there's a win-win right there. I think that's a great idea. Great idea.
Absolutely. And Barry, you mentioned a lunch and learn, which is similar, taking that time. But the challenge I've seen with lunch and learns is people not coming because they're usually optional. And I don't know, Barry, if you've had any ability to like create an incentive for attending lunch and learns or incentive for attending voluntary things like that.
They are totally voluntary. Yes. So we do have, the state does have requirements. So obviously to fulfill and complete what we do is our now virtual 3-day, 2 hours a day introductory training. And then anyone who is an acting supervisor of someone using the cans also has to attend our 2-day, 3-hour each day supervisory training. So we do have some of those things embedded, but yes, right now the lunch and learns are really just a little bit of an enrichment, kind of in the way that you're explaining. People have so much that they can do, but if it's another way to just build awareness that we exist, or word of mouth is increasing. But I really like what you're calling the little micro teaching or micro topics. That's sort of the model, but it's interesting because I've tried to just advertise them a little more when I do have other off the cuff connections with supervisors. And last month, one team down in the lower part of the state required the whole agency or the team that uses the cans to come in. So instead of having half a dozen or a dozen people, that's where we had 50 people show up.
Wow.
But she really thought it was worthwhile. And so we always encourage people, you decide if this is a requirement for your team, you totally have that right. But we'd like to see them be more incentivized and more pushed perhaps by teams, but I think you have to have that balance, because the requirement of I have to do this because I have to do this versus now I'm getting this thing, I'm going to look for other opportunities. But if you're not making me do it, maybe I'll do it then, so.
Yeah. And I love how you emphasize the impact that supervisors have. I mean, you talked about they have a separate training for supervisors, and I don't think all jurisdictions have that. In Allegheny County, we don't, but we do work specifically in a different manner to kind of coach supervisors, because they need to be like the spearheads of the buy-in and, including this in supervision. So I love that you brought that up. And then you have an example of how the supervisor said, no, we need to go to this lunch and learn and enrich ourselves. I mean, we've had the problem where supervisors are like not promoting assessments, and that's been a challenge in some of the programs we've worked with. So I think it's just a critical piece to think about as a trainer, and like that holistic approach.
And so, I joined it. I'm sorry.
Oh, go ahead. Hi.
I joined it a little late, so I had Aaron. I had to run, but you're talking lunch and learns. I do a bi-weekly brown bag lunch, optional every other Friday, and it's been hit and miss on who shows up. And what we have found that implementing the cans or the ANZA and the tools, doing that in our system, we have everybody doing it. I mean, it's kind of mandatory, and they're doing it. Everybody, I've just trained 160 people. So they're all trained, they've all passed, they're doing it. What we're really going through now is really that case conceptualization and applying it. And to me, that's what those brown bag lunches are really for. And I was just talking with my supervisor, just how do we continue to improve buy-in? And we are involved with the RPI process. I'm not sure if you're familiar with it, change leaders, but that we are going to put together sensing sessions, little 5-minute sensing sessions, 5 questions, 5 minutes. That is going to be a shout out to every single one of our staff to be able to come to me and just take 5 minutes and provide what I think is going well, where are the challenges, where the disconnects are, because we're moving from an old process to a new process with all of our treatment plans. We've created a whole new credible plan based off of the CANs, we're calling them the strengths needs assessment tools. We were calling them TCOM tools, but we decided to change that. But that we're trying now to really get that buy-in for those next steps. And we've done community, all of our service managers have had opportunities for us to meet, and again, trying to encourage the buy-in from them. Different sites, I have 100% buy-in. They're going and they're great. Others, it's still checking off the box, and we've just rolled out our whole educational component, so with all of our schools. So there's a little bit of pushback going. So hearing what each of you are doing is super exciting because it's more than the principle. It's all of it, the tool itself they get, and we've even broke down for all our programs that do not participate in the full CANs. They're doing the trauma assessment component out of the CANs, the reaction to trauma and the potential adverse childhood experiences. Those are in the programs that have not adopted, that they may only be like 8-week, 9-week programs. And so we're just doing the trauma component. But I can't wait to keep hearing from what all of you are saying. So I'll shut up now.
That's great to hear, Lori. I mean, it's all a work in progress, right? We're all moving in different ways. I think it's exciting to hear about your education piece. Like, that's incredible that you're doing that. Wow. Good stuff. Good stuff.
You call it a sensing session?
Yes, it's in the whole random process. It's in the change leadership on working typically with an RPI project. You meet with the individuals that are involved in whatever it is you're talking about changing, and you do a little sensing session. You get their opinions about what is doing well, where the challenges are, because there is both the logistics and the understanding and the conceptual, but there's also our electronic records have drastically changed. I mean, we've just trained them in that too, and they're moving over they used to be called TX pluses to credible plan. Now, well, how do I do that? Do I use the old goals? How do I move the old goals into these new format? Because we have formatted our first goal, which is based on the completion. We're calling it discovery process, and it's based off of our CANs, and we have timelines. Residential, it's 2 weeks that they can meet with the clients. So someone's asking me, I'm with an organization called Great Circle in the state of Missouri, and we have multiple residential programs and educational and school-based programs across the state of Missouri. And I had another position with the company for many years, actually in utilization management, and was brought in to start developing trainings, and this was the kickoff. Here you go, Lori. Yeah. So it's been trial by ear, but those sensing sessions, I'm excited. Polls you don't always get the buy-in, and you may get a quick answer, but then you can't have that follow-up question of whether to explain it. So we are doing monthly little communication shout outs on, what we had some interest and challenges with intentional behavior. It was kind of different from what we had our philosophy in the past. So, what we actually met with April on that. What exactly? I want to completely understand intentional misbehavior. What does that mean? And so we've done different shout outs. People who are doing Rockstar, one of the things we found was we do the TCOM tool in our system, but then we're having a golden thread. And so we've developed what's called a rationale. And we were starting to have people put basic information, but they weren't organizing it at a way that could then go right into the treatment plan. So that's been an educational opportunity there, just dealing with the IT component as well, so that if I hit golden thread for my strengths or for my needs, and I have my rationale in my TCOM tool online, then it will pull all that, family functioning too, and the sentence that was written. And so that we can create that case conceptualization right into our treatment planning.
So interesting. And I love this idea of sensing sessions, because we think surveys and focus groups and this and that and all these different ways to get information about what's working and what's working not. But it seems like this short strategy is just such a practical way to get a feel for where staff are and what they need, right, and be able to provide that effectively. So I love that.
And some of our individuals were trained back in March and April. And others, our educational systems were just trained in August and September. So they're in two different places. I'm working on those 5. I wanted it to be 5 questions, 5 minutes, basically, that I was going to, post the questions so that everybody would be able to think about them and that they could call me in. Everybody has 5 minutes. And then I was going to really run the data per location and looking at how many new clients, because one of the challenges is time. One of our programs may have 10 new clients that week. Well, the other one might only have 1. Or like our schools, 45 new kids just started in September. How do we get all of this done? So being able to prioritize it, and for us doing the best job we can to support them, because it's real easy to say this is incorrect or this is incorrect. But it's how do we support you so that you feel that you're being successful at it?
Yeah, I think that's a really just holistic way to try to get that picture and be able to be effective in giving staff what they need. Thank you so much for sharing that and for kind of explaining your take on things. And I think that it's interesting how we might use a little bit of different language for things, but we are all maybe either working towards the same goals or using similar strategies or things like that. Because I'm just thinking about how you talked about the golden thread and service planning, and makes me think of how we do similar, but we don't use that language. So it's interesting. Okay, so I'm not going to go through these because I feel like we all are educated in 6 key principles. These are just some examples. We're sending you the slides of tying those principles back into, real life case scenarios or, mini vignettes. So this is an opportunity for us to have the trainees identify which principle do you see here? What jumps out? They don't always answer the same thing. Like this one here has culture and development in here a little bit, also 30-day windows in here a little bit. So we just engage in the discussion, just to give you that example. And this brings us to a break. So we're at What do we want to do?
I think we can do 5 minutes. It's 3:12. Come back at 3:17. Does that work for folks? We'll get the music going, get some refreshment, shake a little, stretch or shake, whatever you need to do. And then we'll come back at this point, 3:18 for the last part of our session. Oh, we'll do a little B-52s, get us motivated.
All right, are we about ready to come back together?
Welcome back. Welcome back.
Yes. What?
You have your sound. Can you guys hear me? Robin, unmute.
Can you hear me?
It's very, very echoey, a ton of feedback.
I'm going to leave and come back.
Okay.
That sounded fine,
I will
though.
carry on.
But,
oh,
yeah, that last time was fine.
Say
I think you figured it out, Robin, unknowingly.
You're better.
Yeah. I'll let you be.
The universe just works with us. Yeah, for a minute there, it just got really crazy, but you're okay now.
Okay.
It sounded like a rock concert.
Your music went.
Well, I'm gearing up to do that right after the show here.
Right after the horse races. Yeah. All right. So let's move along. I'm going to actually skip through. We are tight on time, but that's okay because the biggest part of this is the discussion, and I love hearing from everyone. So the next piece here was talking about rating scales. And we use a couple different visuals. So you guys might be familiar with this visual with the stoplight that has the random orange light in it. But this is a TCOM tool. And people like this. People like being able to see the visuals around this. So we just wanted to emphasize this one. We also have our basic rating scales that kind of just have the text in them. I'm sure you guys are all familiar with what that looks like, you know, just like the 0, 1, 2, and 3. And it has the, you know, explanation. And then we came up with this one too. And I think people kind of like this. So what this does is really emphasize the idea of strengths being buildable. And, you know, these are like kind of building blocks. So at a 3, it's not a bad thing. It's just not present. A 2, you have something potential to build on, and your 0 and your 1. And we have the icons of the person really getting up and starting to soar with that 0 strength. So just sharing this with you as a resource or example. For needs, we have our stoplight for needs. I think visuals just help folks. And then we have a needs, this building blocks or staircase for the needs that gives the visuals of, you know, and into somebody, there's no issues, no evidence of a need here, no action, the person's walking independently. A 1 being something you want to watch, keep an eye on, a history, or maybe it's an area of disagreement or contention. A 2, the person needs a little bit of support here. The individual needs some support. And a 3, this is something we really want to prioritize and help. This might be disabling or dangerous. So I don't know if you guys like these or are a fan, but we had created these and people seem to use them for their testing and help with just that visual conceptualization of the ratings.
Alicia, Christy has a question. She has her hand up.
Oh, yes, Christy, sorry.
I really love the ones where the little guys are going up the steps. That's really helpful. So I'll look forward to getting that the PowerPoint when you guys send them. But does anybody else have an issue where the switch from the needs to the strengths really trips people up? Like if people are not passing their certification, I can 90% of the time just tell them, do it again, really pay attention to when you switch to strengths. I mean, like I talk it up so much. And the reason is because if you go back to those like 2 visuals, you'll see that in strengths, you know, and I tell this to them, like the strengths one, the 0 is like when somebody's doing, you know, it's like a great thing. And unfortunately, the needs one, when somebody's doing okay in that area, it's 0. So it's like opposite. And so people really have a hard time. I tell them to etch a sketch their brain. like I need you guys to just etch a sketch it out and start with the strengths ratings when you get to the strengths part, because if you're still stuck in the whole where your energy is going regarding these numbers and the needs, then you're not going to do well.
Yeah, you said etch a sketch your brain. I tell them to take their strengths hat off intentionally and put the needs hat on intentionally. Like you have to be super intentional about changing, making sure you're looking at the other rating scale. The other big tip is lower numbers are always better. Yeah. So, fundamentally, if you remember that, you'll remember that a 0 for strengths is better, a 0 for strength or needs, not having a need is better for the person. So just another tip.
Killer on the rating.
Yeah, definitely one of the testing tips. We have a document that highlights some of the critical testing tips. Another thing that's helpful is really explaining the test to people. I mean, we're talking to adults. It doesn't need to be this tricky thing, so I explain what reliability is, that it is scoring you on how close you get to the recommended score so that you can show that you can reliably rate the items. It's not testing you as far as you being, a social worker. We want you to use the ratings reliably. And a 0.70, and I explain everything, and I'm very transparent about the testing process with them. And then we have that rating scale or rating testing tip sheet. We also just recertified their entire workforce because we had a lapse where people were not recertifying. And I don't know if people have experienced the issue with people not recertifying when they should, and people not being successful in recertification. So we came up with a game, the testing tip sheet, and a bunch of other resources and pro tips. And we have an email that we send to people who don't need the full training, but they need to recertify. And we offer them that along with if they want coaching or not, or you can go ahead and take your test. And it's been pretty successful, those resources. We could share them with you for sure.
Mystifying it, right, Alacia? Like that's what you guys have done. You've made it much more concrete. I think there's this, it not becomes for some folks, it's just so overwhelming, or it feels, like it's demystifying what it is and making it very practical for them to think about it. And manageable.
Mm-hmm. Even, Christy, you mentioned how upfront you are with the 60 principles being tough. I say in the beginning of trainings, and I don't know how.
So do I.
How great it is, but I say, we want you to be able to use this assessment effectively with families. That is the most important thing. We also want to relieve any test anxiety you have so that you feel so confident in being able to take this test and use the tool. So during these 3 hours, we're going to do everything we can to get those objectives. So we have our more learning objectives, but I throw in, we want you to be comfortable and ready to take the certification test. We're here for you. And we do very concretely explain things so that people aren't shook up or, the demystifying. So I just think, Christy, it kind of goes along with how you talked about just being really upfront with folks. So this right here, really, really quickly, just this is an example of how we start with that warm-up activity we went over that was basic, what needs and strengths do you see in this scenario, up to we do sentence long scenario ratings, not even connected to an item yet. We're just saying, this is what, so-and-so has a lot of friends. They make friends really easily everywhere they go. How would you rate this strength? A 0, super easy, but they start to rate them and we use polls for that. Then we review items and we do more polls or another game on the hard items. The items that are commonly missed, those tricky ones that have caveats and things to consider. And then we move into the vignette rating, which I'll show you in a second. But I just wanted to kind of outline how the evolution of the rating practice happens in our trainings. And I think it has been effective in getting people to feel more comfortable up to test time. There's a lot of stuff in chat, Robin. I don't know if you've looked at that or.
I apologize. I'm having all sorts of technical problems. That's why if I'm making funny faces, it's because I'm losing screens. And that's why probably my volume was weird. So I'm not able to get a chat so easily, Alicia. My screen's freezing.
Okay. There's a ton of feedback from about the rating scales and different graphics. Kyla or Barry, if you have any graphics that you'd be able to share with the group that you do for ratings, that'd be awesome, or any tip sheets. And we promise we'll send you the rest of the other things that we mentioned. Okay, yeah, tons of stuff in here. I apologize, I wasn't keeping up with the chat.
Yeah, I'm sorry, folks. This is very weird.
All right, I'm gonna breeze through vignettes because I really want to get to the service planning piece, and then I want to give Robin some time to wrap up with a couple other open-ended questions for you all as the training collaborative. So as far as vignettes, these are just some tips. I feel like you guys probably know a lot of this, or this is actually specific to the item review. So before we jump into vignettes, we are going to talk about the items, and just some tips as a trainer is really being able to use language that makes sense to adults, real life examples, not being extremely clinical in explanations, and really making it comfortable and make sense, you know? So I think examples in the items are huge, real life examples. We have created something called a pro tip sheet that is an outline of the commonly missed items. So we know what items are hard, that there's always debates and, you know, people struggle with, and we created a document that's commonly missed items with a few tips that we give folks on that. And back to 6 key principles, when we give these real life examples in our item review, now we're anchoring them back in, right? This is where you might see this 6 key principle arise, and what that might look like in a real life situation related to an actual item. So we're not going to do this activity, but this is just an example. And this is a little wonky because I pasted it from another presentation, but this would be an example of a strengths domain. And we annotate onto the slide. That's what we're doing right now virtually. And we've tried some different techniques at this. And I feel like having a discussion, agreeing upon a score, and then rating the item is beneficial. Another thing that's really great is letting people work it out on their own, and then coming back together in a small group or a partner, you know, and then reporting out. So team-based learning. And I know in our morning session, we talked about that Word document, you know, being able to have people put their thoughts in and then collaborate. Like, that's the key to this. So I'm sure we all do have different strategies, but this is just an example of a mini vignette for a specific domain, and then rating those items. Just another way to practice. And then I have the life functioning here too. This looks really dense in, for some reason on this slide, it just looks kind of wonky. On the slides that we use, I feel like visually a little more appealing. So we go through, and this is a continuation of the strength. So this is still the same person. This is Jesse, and this is his life functioning situation where we rate our life functioning items. And we do our CANS and ANZA trainings together. So we have, this is an ANZA example. I feel like the majority of people here might be CANS, and you might be like, well, this isn't really CANS. So we do breakout rooms. When we get to this part of the training, we split our CANS folks and our ANZA folks into separate breakout rooms. And my colleague Heather is our CANS lead, and she does the CANS mini vignettes with that group, while I do the ANZA mini vignettes with the ANZA group. Any thoughts or questions or anything about this stuff? So we all know that vignettes are hard, they are brain exercise. Like, I feel like by the time you finish a vignette with a group, the whole group's brain is just tired, because especially when you have a group of people who have not had to really think in this way of applying, you know, one rating scale and then another rating scale. And not only that, but looking at a story and being so specific about finding this evidence of this specific item and applying a rating. Like, it's work, it's challenging. But it really is how we get to that place of a common language of knowing what that 0 always is for a strength, or what a 2 always means for a need. So it's really about that skill building. And it's not always a perfect world. So when we are having these discussions about vignettes, a lot of the times people are, they turn their video off and they're just not participating at all. Or you have someone who's getting frustrated, like, okay, I'm not agreeing with any of these scores. This doesn't make sense to me. So it is, as a trainer, it is one of the tougher parts of training. And I feel like you just have to kind of find this happy medium to agree to disagree. Again, transparency is key. So saying to the group, we're not going to agree on every single thing. That's okay. We want you to get in the ballpark. We want you to be able to get used to applying ratings effectively. You don't have to be perfect. There's some level of subjectivity, but how do we get as close as we can to consensus? And that's really what the assessments are about when you're working with the family, when you're working with the team. So that's a skill that just is really required. So just some considerations: make sure that your vignette goes through PRAID, that it's vetted, that there are established gold standard scores for your practice vignettes, and take advantage of team-based learning if you're able to. It's been effective. It's been a struggle too to figure that out virtually, but we've tried a ton of different things. Before we went virtual, we were doing where they would rate a domain by themselves, then go into a partner, then come report it out to the large group, and we'd all discuss. But if you're not familiar with the idea of team-based learning, it's a really cool strategy that applies so perfectly to vignette rating. All right, we're just gonna move through. So those of you that were in our training earlier, we went through like our pre and post work and our day of training piece. So after the training, they have a couple steps that they have to complete, and they receive an email that once again has every single resource, like it's your training folder all over again. And you will have instructions to be able to complete your certification on the PRAID site. And the PRAID site has a ton of resources in itself and different practice activities, depending on your jurisdiction, but they have access to all of those resources as well. Then they have their post-training modules, which include, right now, we have one on the IT system, one on engagement, which is super, super short. And I humbly say that we need to do better in Pittsburgh and Allegheny County at really expanding on that engagement piece and taking it over time, because engagement is a skill that they can reflect on and think about how they could do better with it. And then we have a module on trauma-informed care. And I would like to include something about really looking through the assessment through an equitable lens. And before we move into the service planning stuff, can I just open up a little bit of a conversation about how do you all encourage the ratings of the cultural items on the assessment? How do you train that? How do you really encourage staff to be thinking about equity when they are rating every single item on the assessment? We had someone ask this question earlier, and I think there's consistent data that people don't want to have the conversation about culture, about SOGI. So does anyone have any strategies that they use? Or any challenges that they face? Can anyone relate to that? Interesting stuff in the chat. Does anyone do anything with the culture piece? I mean, we have the 6 key principle. I honestly think we got to go deeper with it though, because still those items, I know most jurisdictions have the 3 cultural items at least. Some jurisdictions might have 8. I think we have 4, and we have a strength. So it varies from place to place, but regardless, culture is such an important piece.
I just use a lot of examples because I think people don't always consider culture. And I've seen a lot of people just score at zeros. So we just use a lot of real examples of cases that like I've seen or I've heard of or whatever, where there's been a treatment impact or an engagement impact because somebody missed something with that. Because I think that's where, in some ways, they see that a lot is people don't engage because you didn't take the time to assess that, or there's a massive treatment impact because you misunderstood something.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Christy, do you have something?
I guess just regarding cultural identity and ritual, just emphasizing for people what the difference is between that, but also the fact that they go hand in hand, because like the cultural identity is how, you know, you internalize that or identify, and the ritual part is the actions associated or the customs associated with that cultural identity. So so the connection, but also emphasizing the difference there. And then another thing that I really try to give some very specific examples about and emphasize is that if we have a youth who identifies as gay, bisexual, transgender, whatever it is, that in and of itself does not mean you rate it as a concern. Like that's not, is it, you know, and so it could be, it needs to have an impact or a functional impact on their life. It's not just the fact that they identify in that group. So I really try to like make sure people are, it's not just checking off that you have a kid on your caseload that you know, identifies. It's gotta result in some sort of impact. And so I do spend some time on that one to give examples about, like, it could be that the kid is struggling to identify, but the caregivers are fine. Like, they're like, we're just waiting for him to come out to us. Like, we're okay with that. Or it could be that the kid is okay with it, but the caregivers are like freaked out and are like, no, you need to move this kid because I don't agree with that. Or, you know, whatever the scenario, it's got to be an impactful thing, not just I identify, you know.
Absolutely. Thank you, Christy. Kyla, do you have something to share?
I was just going to share that, like, we also have the flip side of that, where it's like, well, we're just not going to market a problem because it's their culture. And it's like, well, but we're child welfare. Like, if we got called because of this, like, you can't not address it. And so we spend a lot of time talking about, but addressing doesn't necessarily have to be like a formal service. Like, we can educate, we can connect, we can get to support. Like, there's a lot of other things there. And then what we did with recertification, not with new employee, but with recertification to the issue where they want to debate vignettes, we actually made that the purpose. And was like, okay, so we did a poll, we'd get a nice split. We had a couple that we very intentionally were like causing problems. And we'd get a 1-2 split. And so we'd then divide the rooms and be like, all right, you tell me what it is. How did mom answer that question that made you make it actionable? All right, what if now my ones, tell me what made it non-actionable. And we talk about like how that whole point of having that communication and having that family and that consensus is the reason that this tool is amazing. And it isn't about you having to decide alone. And I am telling, like, at first people were pissed. Like, the first 2 of those questions, people are like, I want to win, I want the right answer. And it's like, no, I want you to learn how to have these conversations meaningfully and ask that next best question. And it ended up being like, in the moment, it was hard as a trainer. Like, we were getting a lot of hate, but afterwards people were like, you know, it really helped. Like, I know, like, I get what you're trying to tell me to do. And we saw really, really good pass rates with that, which I'm not sure if that helped. I think it's helping far more with the like conversation part of it, but because it's always the catch with us. Like, we were really good at training to the vignette, but then I knew we weren't actually like doing it with families the way we wanted. So anyway.
Yeah.
I
love that idea.
Yeah, you come up with the best ideas. Did you guys do that in person, or was this in virtual?
It was supposed to be in person. So we do ours cross system. So we have 5 major systems using our Utah tool. And so we were originally going to be doing this in local offices. So the first 2 of the recertifications pre-pandemic happened in person with our juvenile justice, our DCFS, our system of care, and a couple of our providers. And so we did that in person, which was great because then you could really get into it. But virtually it still works as well. We just converted it to a Kahoot and was able to do the rest of them that way.
Here's why I'm asking, because you could record that and then like create that as like something that you show as part of a training, having people do
right,
that
back and forth. Yeah. Oh, that's a good idea.
Genius. I love that. We need to do that. That's so brilliant. Like, that's
it was just fascinating because we were doing it still by office, and there was definitely trends that you would notice in certain of the vignettes. Like, we did one with like
a mother letting her 16-year-old drink. And depending on which part of our state we were in, there was a lot more. It was really, I was like, wow, okay. Like you got a lot of insight too.
That's so fantastic. That's an interesting segue. I want to mention some of the chat that was happening. And I closed my chat, so I can't remember who was going back and forth about this, it was Hilda and Christy and maybe a couple others about, do their staff, are they hesitant to score on threes? Who was saying that? Hilda said that folks are hesitant to score threes. And Christy, you were saying your group score everything on threes. And I was going to ask about systems, because I can tell you when we were first rolling this out in child welfare, everything was a 3 because it's so crisis based, and everything was a strength. The fact that the child didn't smoke was suddenly a strength, a centerpiece strength. So it has so much to do sometimes with the system and the cultures. So that's why I love, Kyla, what you were saying. I was connecting it to the discussion on the chat, because that also has a lot to do with how we score. So it's also getting past the culture of the organization or the lens from which we're working from, right? Because we get really tied to that when we're doing this.
Yeah, I love the idea of having people like debate like that, because it's practical. You're going to get that rating practice, and you're also going to get that conversation practice. So I think that's definitely genius, and a video would be amazing. And then as far as like the culture piece, and I mean, even trauma, culture, equity, going back to that idea of connecting things and connecting the dots. We have a training on SOGI. We have a training on equity. We have a training on trauma. But do those trainings really mention how that's included in assessment? And so that's like a question I think we as trainers really want to ask, and how we're developing that. And I think, I don't know, I have this idea that maybe as a training collaborative, we can literally send a document or something around with all of our different ideas around the cultural identity and training and the examples that we have seen and know, so that we kind of have like a toolbox as a group to pull out of. Because I do think it's those real life examples that solidify it and help people make sense. And also the practice, Robin, you said earlier, being comfortable with the uncomfortable.
Yeah.
So, all right, we are.
Alicia, is it okay if I ask one more question, a little bit around that? Because for us, it may have to do, just for clarity, I work with a bunch of therapists, so they don't want to rate anything a 3. And so I think that makes sense in terms of culture, but we also have an assessment team. And so there's a little bit of a disconnect sometimes, right? So the kids get assessed by one group of people, and then they're treated by a different group of people. And so some of that, the question around culture and trauma and some of that, like the assessment team has sort of pushed back and said, it's too early in the conversation for us to talk about race or culture or sexual orientation or gender identity, any of those things. But then what happens is the next time the CANS is done, 6 months later or 3 months later, depending on the kiddo's age, for us anyway, then that clinician has a tendency to just keep the scores as they came in from the initial assessment. So are there other folks out there that have like assessing teams, and how do they address that, and then that disconnect to when it goes from the assessment clinician to the treating clinician?
If anyone. Jennifer, did you want to share? Oh, I thought I saw her light up. Hoda, I mean, I definitely can concur and agree with that. I think that some of our messaging is that you're not going to get all the information at the first sitting. So, and people may not want to open up with you right away. So there might be more information. You might have a 6-month assessment that looks more intense than the first, and that's okay. But it's a thin line, because that doesn't mean to leave everything as missing or 0 or explore at your first assessment. And I think it does come down to us as trainers being able to really figure out how we And I think Christy just said it, really infusing this into every aspect of training. Culture is everything. Culture is every single item. It's not just those items. It's really looking at the whole assessment, the whole person through that cultural lens. So maybe, I don't know. I think as a training collaborative, we need to come together and brainstorm. I know we see consistent data where people are not rating items around those areas. So, and if anyone has any other thoughts, please feel free to throw them in chat, or any ideas about, you know, talking about that cultural piece. So the last thing here is just the service planning workshop. And I'm just going to show you an example of an outline. And this is something we created more recently. This is all virtual. There's no live piece of this. But they basically get 4 modules. They're through Qualtrics. And the first one is basics of service planning. So everyone's service plan is going to have a different structure, different like negotiables and requirements. Then we go into goal writing. So how do you use the CANS or ANZA to write goals that address the things we said we were going to address? To, you know, and this might be cross-cutting goals or addressing multiple needs within one goal. And then we talk about writing action steps and how we're incorporating you know, all the different team members into action steps and how we're making them concise. And then we talk about using strengths in the goal or in the plan functionally. So not just putting a list of strengths in there, but actually incorporating them into action steps. So this is just an outline of what we do for our service planning workshop. If anyone wants more information about that, we're happy to share it. This has been an advancement for us specifically because we did do it in person, hour and a half. And now to have this broken up into these 4 different modules, they're really concise. They're not like, the whole thing doesn't take anyone longer than an hour, probably. We actually go in and review it and send feedback in a certificate and coaching.
Oh, wow. That's cool.
So yeah, if anyone wants more information, you know, this might relate back to Lori's, the golden thread that she was talking about, connecting the CANS ANZA to the plan. So that's just something we do. And Robin, we're so short on time now.
I have a plan, Alacia. I have a plan.
You always do. All right. So the winner's circle, and I don't know.
Keep going.
Tell me your plan. Okay.
Keep going. Keep going. Keep going, I think. Okay, let's land here because we have how much time? We've got 8 minutes. So rather than try to rush through more questions and answers, because this has been a lot of great conversation in the chat and conversation,
Absolutely.
you know, talking here today. I'm so happy about that. I'm going to ask you all at the start of this, we put a pledge out there to be flexible and be open to all the possibilities. So I'm going to ask you as a fellow trainer, would you be open to, if Alacia and I were to send out an email to all of you, because we're going to send all that information out October 31st, right? But we have your emails. How would you feel if we sent out an email beginning of next week, because we don't want to take away any time while you're at the TCOM conference this week, but just asking you a couple more questions about training needs. So we talked a lot about what you might need as a trainer, but I'm thinking about for your staff, like in terms of how do you identify for the workforce around assessment, how do you identify when they have certain specific training needs? Or how do you support if you're within a team of trainers? Now you might just be the one person, the sole person holding down the fort when it comes to training. So some of these might not, I'm seeing Hilda, you're saying yes to me. So that's rough. Some of you might be part of a team. So do you ever do training observations? Do you do any kind of quality assurance with each other about skill level and how, again, can we bump this up? And then we started talking a little bit about coaching, and I can't, you know, Barry, I'm so thrilled you were part of the conversation today because I think you gave us a lot to think about. But maybe asking a couple more questions to all of you, just again, thinking about what are some of those things that maybe we could explore through TCOM, with April, with John, as they're thinking about how do we support maybe a pathway of coaching in addition to our trainers. And so we'll still send out all our materials by the end of October, even if you don't respond back to our little survey we send out. But maybe that could be like a little carrot if we send out an email to all of you next week, just asking a couple questions if you'd be willing to respond back that way. How does that sound for folks? Because I don't want to rush the conversation, and this is a lot of talking. I mean, this has been a lot of thinking and a lot of information exchange. And I just thought that might be a nice way to wrap it up, so that if there are any other things that have been said that you didn't get a chance to comment on, or if you had any words of wisdom that you wanted to impart before we all left each other, I wanted to make space for that, because we can get this other information through like a brief survey, because I think there's going to be even more opportunity to continue that discussion. And we certainly got some really great information, like a newsletter, and I'm still going to pursue some kind of buddy system. I'm just going to articulate it better, but just thinking some other things up. So does anyone have any words of wisdom that they want to share, or any comments or parting questions? If you had to come up with a word right now, how are you feeling? I'm feeling so energized by this group.
Energized.
I'm seeing grateful. Grateful's a word. I love that word. Hopeful, transformative.
Transformative. I love that.
Motivated, energized.
Yep. Excited, inspired.
Love those. Not alone. Good. We are a community of practitioners here.
Yeah. And I think that's like a big thing today I'm taking away. Like, we go a whole year and we don't necessarily talk to other TCOM trainers or get like a lot of interaction with you all. Let's try to make a commitment this year to stay in touch and to stay involved and continue to share messages, whether it's, through the survey, but maybe it's just an email chain where we're like, hey, I found this resource. Let's really try to like keep this collaborative spirit up, I think. I'm always refreshed after TCOM.
Right, Alacia? Today's the start. We have everyone's email address. You're not going to get rid of us. So this is just the beginning. So watch out. Okay. Well, we can hang out for a few minutes afterwards if anyone has any questions. But this has been quite a day one. It's even like the pre-day. It's not even, it's the day of the dawn of the Derby. But that's, we researched all this stuff, guys. So we haven't even hit the Kentucky Derby tomorrow. So
champagne spray, because we are the winners.
To all of you.